red and the nation goes blue, then they have to appoint the blue electors. Okay, so that's they have to name it in conjunction with the national popular vote. So there are contingencies set up for potential problems that might arise in the compact in the highly unlikely event of an actual tie on the national popular vote. The presidential elector certifying official of each member state shall certify the appointment of the elector state nominated in association with the presidential slate receiving the largest number of popular votes in their state. So if there was a tie, then you go back to sort of what we have now.
You break the tie, right? And if there's a tie again, then you go to the House of Representatives.
That's right.
All those procedures stay in place.
If there's not a majority.
If there's not, exactly.
More contingencies. So Article 3-7, if for any reason the number of presidential electors nominated in a member state in association with the national popular vote winner is less than or greater than that state's number of electoral votes, the presidential candidate on the presidential slate that has been designated as the national popular vote winner shall have the power to nominate the presidential electors for that state, and that state's presidential electors certifying officials shall certify their appointment.
Right.
So this could happen, for example, this could happen if one of the members was illegal. So maybe a member of Congress was selected or something like that.
Exactly.
That would be one case.
Which has
where
happened.
which happens, yeah. And they're legally not allowed to participate as electors, and so then the presidential candidate who slate won the national popular vote would step in and say, here's my appointment. This also could theoretically happen if there didn't happen to be any slate on your state ticket for that. So if, the Green Party actually won the national party popular vote, but you didn't have the slate for the Green Party, then the presidential candidate can also come in. The presidential candidate who won the national popular vote would also come in and say, here's my Green Party slate. You didn't have a slate. Here's who I select for your state. Yeah. Some rules for, and then there's some rules for fusion voting. Could also create the possibility, and most states don't have fusion voting. New York does have fusion voting. That's like where two parties say we both support the same candidate. And so it would come into effect there. And it could also theoretically come into effect if there was a write-in vote who won a national popular vote or write-in candidate, then that write-in candidate would be allowed to set the slate for any state that didn't have him on the ballot and didn't have, or him or her on the ballot and didn't didn't have electors selected, a slate of electors for that. Okay. So the final clause in 3 is this article shall govern the appointment of presidential electors in each member state in any year in which this agreement is on July 20th in effect. States cumulative processing the majority of electoral votes. So this operates along with 4-1. I'm just going to go ahead, Kim. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Go ahead because we're out of time. So agreement takes effect when states cumulatively possess a majority of the electoral votes. Have enacted the agreement, right? So have to have 270. A state is not counted until the law takes effect in accordance with the state's constitution. So if there's some provision for a delay or something like that, that's set in there.
That's the clearance, voting rights clearance. Some states need to be done.
It has to be done by, yeah. The same version of the compact must be enacted by each state, but it does allow for minor wordings, like say you said 4 instead of 2.
Yeah,
or something like that.
Numberings, if you want to do Romans instead of ones, but it's got to be substantial.
Yeah, but very minor changes that do not change the substance of the thing. You can withdraw, member states can withdraw, we talked about this a second ago, except that a withdrawal occurring 6 months or less before the end of a president's term shall not become effective until a president or vice president shall have been qualified to serve the next term. So that prevents sort of people monkeying with an electoral college and saying, well, we want to pull out this time because it doesn't look good for us, right? It sort of prevents that from happening, that sort of last-minute political calculation. But it still allows them to withdraw, so they can still leave the compact, which is important. But it provides for this blackout period, so you can't do that sometimes. And the chief executive of each member state shall promptly notify the chief executive of all other states when this agreement has been enacted and has taken effect in that official state, when the state has withdrawn from this agreement, and when this agreement takes place generally, so that there's communication between member states about what they're doing. We're in the compact, we're out of the compact. So these are all sort of rules. I think that we just have this one more. Yeah. This agreement shall shall terminate if the electoral college is abolished, don't need it anymore. 4-5, if any provision of this agreement is held invalid, the remaining provision shall not be effective.
Why would you want that?
The last one?
That's a severability
Yeah,
clause.
no, I know what it is, but why would you want it on something like this? To me, if the court invalidated any one provision, it seems to me you want to toss something
A
out.
lot of, like, first of all, whenever you're doing something like this, you want to put that in because you don't want to toss the whole thing out.
No, I'm saying,
yeah,
in
but
this one, I
She's
disagree.
saying you do.
right, they may take one part out and say, no, you can't do it that way, but the rest
No, I
works.
mean, severability clauses are usually used in
Right.
contracts, I understand
Right.
the reasoning for it. But in this one, I think it's a bad idea. I think if a court were to strike down any one of these things, I think you wouldn't want to operate with half a compact.
Well, if that is the consensus, then states would opt out. It's like, well, we got into it, that was part of it. If that's not there anymore, we're getting out. And it'd be up to the states to act.
Yeah, I just logically, I don't.
You know, that's a very good point. That's a very
It's
good
an
point.
interesting provision that you have the opt-out before. Now, both major parties are now holding their nominations in August. So you have the opt-out before you even know who the presidential and vice presidential candidates are going to be.
Right.
I think that's going to look kind of strange to a lot of people. Second, you have a provision for what happens if a presidential candidate or vice presidential candidate dies in late October, or it's too late to change the ballot, or after, between the election day and the electoral college meets.
You
Anything
have
like
that
that.
problem now.
Yeah,
Say again?
You have that problem now.
that
No,
could
we don't
happen
have
now.
that. No, we don't have that problem now.
Someone could die.
Because you're electing electors, and we've had presidential candidates die, and we've had vice presidential candidates die, either just before the election, or turns out, they weren't going to win, Horace Greeley is an example, or after the election day and before the electoral college. But since we're now electing electors who are free agents in this process and authorized by the voters of their state, as opposed to, it's very different. They go ahead and do what their duties are. Now you would have somebody who's got all these votes. If it's in a way early voting is going, somebody died on October 27th, you'd have millions of votes for somebody who's ineligible to serve as president, and for which there's no provision for electors to choose somebody in electoral college. And then, or after someone maybe has won the election, you have a winner who's now dead. And people didn't, it's one thing for people to have voted for Obama or Bachmann, but they voted for electors for them in that. And they can go ahead, and then they're empowered now to go ahead and choose. Now, it's pretty clear the people will have been voting for a particular individual only, and then the entire election is cast aside. So it is a contingency. I guess you haven't thought through it.
I don't necessarily agree with that because that same scenario could happen now. The people that are nominated on the slate of electors, a Republican will give the 5 the electors in New Mexico. The Democrat will do theirs, and whoever is determined by the Secretary of State as those people will go. And you know those are party line people. They're going to do that, and that could happen now.
But maybe so, but you're electing electors. Now you're voting for a particular individual, only that individual.
I'm not sure I understand this.
What would happen with this situation? It's a
Control-
really interesting
Oh, it is.
question.
It's an
The
interesting
controlling
scenario.
decision for those electors is the life of that person over there that's got the accumulated national votes over there. Now he's dead.
What happens with the U.S. Senate if that happens in a U.S. Senate situation?
The U.S. Senate is appointed always by the governor of the state. For a
Or you
state
have a special.
House of Representatives, you can never appoint one of them, you have to have a special election.
It varies by state percent. But it would vary by state, wouldn't it? Because in New Mexico, you're required to vote, the electors don't have, theoretically, they have free agency. But by law, they're required to vote, and there are many faithless elector laws, so they're required, so many electors are already required to vote.
For the winner of their state.
For the
not
winner of
this
their
dead
state.
person over there.
Right, but maybe the winner of the state died. What if the winner of their state died? Then they have to vote for them, correct?
No, because the
Is there
provision
something
actually,
in the,
provision says actually for the party that elected them. It's not for the person.
so they don't vote for the, because I think in the certificate of vote, they vote for the person.
But the party that elects him, so if Obama wins the national vote, or Bachmann, or whoever wins the national vote, that would be the party that elected those electors. And you're not talking about people that going to the Electoral College with free will. These are party activists who are getting rewarded by doing this. They're going to go and cast their vote for the person who wins. I mean, for the person of their party.
And the U.S. Senate, it's up to the legislature to determine how that, they can either, the governor can either appoint, or the governor, like in Oregon, the governor can either appoint or hold a special election to fill the vacancy. It's not mandated that it's an appointment.
All presidential electors shall cast their ballots in the electoral college for the candidates of the political party which nominated them as presidential electors.
For the candidates of the political party. So you're saying that the party would have to come
So if
in?
the candidate dies, they still have that vote. That's still there.
But, yeah, but no, for the party that elected them. And we have somebody, let's say that you have Obama win New Mexico, but Bachmann wins nationally. You can't follow that provision.
Sure, because Bachmann won the vote pursuant to the laws of the state of New Mexico.
No, there are already,
Am I missing-
there are
am I missing
Obama electors who are up there waiting to vote. And now the certificate of election comes in that Bachmann won nationally. It says for the candidate of the party that elected them, not that won nationally according to MTV.
Can you read it again? I want to make sure I understand your
This
question.
would change if the state
I mean, that would
adopted.
change.
Right.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff would be out of date.
Well, but that's the whole point. You adopt it legislatively, and then this goes away.
But we still haven't addressed the deceased
right.
candidate, which I
You're
think
gonna have to
that's
address
a tricky one.
So you're gonna have to address the deceased candidate
Okay, understand.
Well, what happens then?
plus this.
Okay.
We have to change that.
Yeah, you'd have to change that.
Yeah.
There's tons of stuff you have to.
Throw in our
The
electoral.
election, I can tell you there's so much that needs to be changed in the election stuff that